topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program, which has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. If we've not met and you don't know me, I'm an organizational psychologist and logotherapist, speaker, and author. My team and I at Gusto Now help companies to enliven and fortify their operations by building a dynamic, high-performance culture and inspirational leadership activated by meaning and purpose. You can learn more about how we can work together at gusto-now.com or my personal site, elisecortez.com. Before we get into today's program, I'm thrilled to announce that registration is now open for a fabulous new conference for women, for which I'll serve as the MC. It's called Thrive in 25 and is a jam-packed few days in Chicago, June 25th through the 28th, 2025, designed to develop women as whole selves, from bolstering your mindset to your financial acumen to leadership to incorporating nature and art into your life to raise consciousness and much more. Visit thrive-n25thenumber.com for more information and to register. Use my promo code of GUSTO, all caps, to gain access to the free books and programs I'll be gifting registrants. See you there. Getting into today's program, we have with us Shakti Dudley, who has established herself as a trusted transformational leadership consultant, intuitive life coach, and spiritual guide, offering a holistic approach to authentic, conscious leadership and life mastery. Also with us is Prushan, a seasoned professional with over 35 years of experience in sales, management, leadership, and consulting, and is a business mystic, blending experience, skills, and wisdom to disrupt the thinking and stir the souls of leaders. We'll be talking about their work together, helping to cultivate enlightened leaders. Alan and Shakti, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So great to have you on the other side of my mic. I loved reminiscing with both of you about our work together some years ago when we were all together in a consulting company. And that is where I like to say I picked you up along the way in life.
Very true.
We'll accept it.
It's an amazing thing, this thing called life. So happy to have you here and get to talk about what you're doing together. It's so great. So we'll get into that. But because our listeners and viewers don't know you the way that I do, let's have you each to share a little bit about your background and then what brought you together for this new venture.
All right. Well, I've been in the field of transformational leadership for 45 years now. And for 30 of those 45 years, I really worked on a separate path to work with clients in their spirituality. And I have been looking and searching for a way to bring those two together, leadership and spirituality. And a few years ago, through Alan's and my relationship and working together on other things, I just had this vision of that union between spirituality and leadership and started to talk to Alan about it. And here we went to work on it 2 years ago, and here we are launching the Enlightening Leaders Journey.
It's fantastic.
It's
Alan?
very exciting.
Yeah, so my path is a little different. You know, I've spent my whole career working with the C-suite, literally from the CFO to CIO to the CEO, and I have a very, global mindset view of the world. And while I have some similar training in background to Shakti, I have also spent a fair amount of time in leadership development. So when Shakti came to me with this idea about integrating what we call the oneness of spirit and leadership, it was a natural for me to say yes to, because, I'm very much like many of the people that we endeavor to serve in so much as they are business focused first, and the spiritual side has oftentimes been in the back seat.
Well, I'm going to comment on that in just a second here, but before I get into that, I do want to have you presence what you are doing together at Enlightening Leaders and how that really came to be. Why aren't we called, I don't know, majestic leaders or something like that? Why Enlightening Leaders?
Well, we really look very consciously, and you know us, Elise, we're very, very conscious and aware of language.
Yes.
And the power that language and the energy that language contains. So we looked at enlightened leadership. We looked at all kinds of names, but we really wanted an adjective that had it be alive and present in the moment. Enlightening leaders. So enlightenment, it really points to you've obtained a certain level of wisdom in your spirituality, and it enlightens your path and enlightens your way. And we wanted Enlightening Leaders to really be about reawakening the oneness in today's leaders and shifting consciousness from separation to oneness and bringing that to leaders, because we see that it's time to see spirituality and leadership as one and not as separate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, Elise, is we were very intentional, as Shakti said, to use the word enlightening versus enlightened. And
Yes.
the reason for that is the more one pursues being enlightened or enlightenment, the more they realize there's a gap from where they are to where they could be. So we never actually attain being enlightened. You know, it almost, from my own personal experience, the more I see myself as becoming enlightened or, experience enlightenment, the more I realize how much further I have to go.
Right. Same thing with self-actualization. Absolutely. It's never-ending ceiling, if you will.
Exactly. And we didn't want people to believe there was a place to get to.
Okay. I like that. I like that. Now, Liz, let me hear you say a little bit about what your perspective is on why you think the world needs more enlightened leaders. And I think even I'm starting to sense that you feel like people are ready for this, or maybe wanting this. So what is it what's happening in the world that makes you think we need more of these enlightened leaders? And I tend to agree, by the way.
Yeah, well, I'll start that. I mean, if you look at what the societal changes that are actually impacting our world today, with the impact that social media has, and that the small person has a bigger voice than they ever had before, what you can see is that people are clamoring for change, whether it's the LGBTQ community or the Me Too movement or other marginalized groups in society, and in the workplace, people wanting to be in environments that are representative of who they are, what they're about. And as you pointed out in the heading of your show, is being up to something bigger than themselves. It requires a different type of leader to lead people that are interested in that, right? And even when we look at like the wars that are going on around the world and how people are aligning with different groups of people in those spaces, they're actually saying the status quo and how we've dealt with these things in the past is no longer acceptable.
Yeah.
And so what that means is the leaders need to change. So you could say it's being forced upon the leaders from the bottom up.
Yeah, well said. That's quite insightful, and I do agree with that. And what's amazing to me in this wonderful arena called Working on Purpose podcast is I have had several guests on my podcast over the last several years that there's a coalescence around this idea. I mean, just recently I've had Steve Farrell on my program, and he is all about this idea of oneness, and he started this organization called Humanity's Team. It's all about celebrating and embracing the idea of oneness. Just a couple weeks ago, I had Yossi Amram on, and he's all about spiritually intelligent leadership. The last chapter of my last book, The Great Realization, is on spiritual intelligence in the workplace. I mean, so I'm just seeing more and more people who are coming to very similar ideas about what they want from themselves, for the world, for their organizations. And I'm very encouraged by that.
As are we.
And the other thing that I would say to add on to what you've both just said is that if we look at what's happening in the world, of course, in organizations, in families, in relationships, particularly with leadership around the world, the consciousness of humanity right now is one of separation. And that consciousness is causing an enormous amount of suffering.
Yeah.
So there's a growing demand for spirituality in both our personal and professional realms. And leaders and employees are alike, and people in their lives are seeking deeper meaning and connection in their work, in their lives, and they're yearning for an awakening to happen, to shift out of consciousness and into oneness. And that's going to require a profound rethinking of what leadership means and how it's practiced.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things that I find amazing, I know we do similar work together, so it's just such a sacred thing to get to do this kind of work with people, to be in that tender space with people on their level, under their journey of development. And at the same time, what I'm very privy to is that many people overestimate how well developed they are. In fact, I have something I do in my workshops now. I have a brand new book coming out probably next year, and a course along with it. It's really about nurturing higher consciousness and deeper emotions. And so I use David Hawkins' map of consciousness to be able to kick that course off. And I ask participants to guess where they think they are from 0 to 1,000 on that, keeping in mind that the average, a few years ago, he would have said was 207. People tend to estimate that they're at 400 or 500. And it's amazing, right? So there's so much work to be done and so much opportunity. So could you speak to this notion of there's opportunity, and that people do tend to overestimate just how far along they are?
So it's a very interesting thing you point to, and it actually points back to something that we just spoke about, which is the more we pursue something, the more we realize how far away we are from what it is that we're pursuing, right? And so I think what you're pointing to is really the difference between, somebody who's not necessarily, as it relates to this conversation, all that much on an enlightening journey of their own. They just think they are. And so for us, we really, this offering, this community that we're creating is really focused on senior leaders who already recognize that they have a strong connection to spirit and have their own spiritual journey that they're on, and yet they feel that they can't integrate it with their leadership. It seems like they're separate and distinct from each other. And that might be because of how we were raised in the corporate world, in an old paradigm, and that these things shouldn't intermix. And so the people that end up, engaged in the conversation that Shakti and I are engaged in here with this Enlightening Leaders Journey are really people that are already on a journey. And Shakti and I can think about a client that we work with right now who literally says his calling is being a servant leader. And he is. There's no question about it. And yet there's still a very large gap for him, right? So I don't think that in his case, he would overscore himself because he engages with us, he works with us, he recognizes there's a big gap for him to cover. And so I think it's more a function of people who aren't necessarily on that path that would likely overscore themselves than people who are already on the path.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Now, for our listeners and viewers who are maybe new to this whole idea of, this enlightening path, pursuing a path of toward enlightenment or in being enlightening, in my world, of course, spiritual intelligence, inspirational leadership, what might they be recognizing in their life if they're not on the path already? What might be happening for them that might be an indication that there could be an opportunity to step into this path that you're helping to steward? What would be like symptoms for them?
Well, it could be a variety of things, Elise. They could be suffering. They could feel this divide in themselves and not know how to wrestle it or how to tame it.
Okay.
They could be lonely. One of the myths of leadership is that it's lonely at the top. Not as an enlightening leader, but in the traditional paradigm of leadership, it could be thought to be lonely at the top.
Yeah.
And that they're looking for connection and don't know how to find it. Or they are recognizing that they are on the path, but they're missing distinctions. They're missing the energy that they need to really catapult themselves and their organization forward. And they're looking for guides. They're looking for mentorship and people that can support them on their journey.
Mm-hmm.
I would add to that, there's what we like to call a healthy discontent with the way things are in their life, right? So, the leaders that we're talking about, they have big dreams, big goals, big aspirations, and yet they feel a discontent between where they are and what they envision for the future.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful way to open the possibility for those who are listening that this might be something for them. Let's take our first break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been here with Shakti, Dudley, and Alan Prushan of Enlightening Leadership. We've been talking a little bit about their perspective of why the world needs more enlightened leaders and how you might recognize that this might be a journey for you. After the break, we're going to start talking about some of their attributes of enlightened leadership. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, as I am dedicated to helping create a world where people realize their potential at work, are led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness, and we do business that betters the world. I keep researching and writing my own books. So my last one came out in March of 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it to help leaders understand the nature of today's workforce and what they really want from their employers. And then I offered 22 best projects to help equip them to create the culture to provide that. You can find more about my books at my websites, elisecortez.com, gusto-now.com, or on Amazon. If you are just now joining us, my guests are Alan Prushan and Shakti Dudley of Enlightening Leaders. They're offering design for business leaders to embrace and integrate their spirituality into their lives, their leadership, and their businesses, which is what we're talking about today. So I would love for us to dive into as many of the attributes that you have. We probably won't get to all of them, but I would love for us to distinguish as best we can, so people start to see what's the promise of this. What does this look like and smell like and taste like? So the first one I wanted to start with here is listening, looking, and leisure. What an interesting group of things to put in one attribute.
Yes, Shakti, if you don't mind, I'll start us off here.
I was hoping you would.
Thank you. So it's very fascinating. Most of us in business get to senior levels of leadership because of our education and then what we're able to demonstrate at work. But in that education, we're never taught really about listening and looking for sure. And in this context, when we talk about looking and listening, we're not actually talking, well, what are we looking and listening for and to whom? And really what we're doing is looking and listening for spirit's guidance. So what that looks like, and I was really prepared to give you an example, is, when we get into the quiet in a meditative environment or situation, and then we present whatever it is that's top of mind for us. And just being in the quiet, if we effectively listen for guidance frequently, not always, because it's not like on demand, something emerges. And that happened actually for me today, as I was sharing with Shakti 2 nights ago, I think. Yes, 2 nights ago, I was driving home with my son and his partner and my wife, and my wife asked me a question, and I overreacted to the situation, and caused an upset for my wife and for me, and I suspect for my son and his partner. So, in the morning on Monday, I in the quiet, I explored it, and what showed up for me was I need to be accountable for my actions, and I need to send an apology to my children and communicate, what was kind of happening for me. And I copied my wife just so she knew that I actually did this. And my wife, first thanked me for doing it. And I said, "You're welcome. I just want to be clear. I didn't do it for you. I did it for our children and for me." Right. And part of it for me is A, to be responsible for my behavior, but also B, and we'll talk about this some more, which is to be accountable and to be vulnerable. And these things are what enlightening leaders do. They don't act like, "Oh, I can't make a mistake. I can't be weak," or something like that. And, I got really positive feedback from our children. That wasn't my objective. And I literally said, "If there's something we need to talk about for you to be complete, please let me know." And it was in part for me to get complete for what happened. So that's the looking and the listening. And the looking is really fascinating because we simply are not trained to look. We are so trained to use our brain for thinking. And looking for me is literally closing my eyes and being able, I like taking pictures, but using my imagination to create word pictures or pictures of situations in the past. And it helps reveal things to me. And that's what really looking is. And then the last thing is leisure. When I grew up in the corporate world, vacationing and talking about leisure was not like a big deal. In fact, there was a badge of honor when people didn't take vacations.
Right.
But the irony of it is that when we go into leisure, especially it frees our mind up. We get released from the day-to-day burdens of our work, and new creativity and inspiration emerges. And I love using the example of Richard Branson because he's really known for stepping away from his work and just getting to a leisurely environment. And he talks about the level of creativity that gets generated when he does that. And that's what's available to each and every leader by actually stepping away, creating leisure, and then looking and listening, and we'll see what emerges, right? And looking and listening to our spirit and to the spirit of all that is, as opposed to just trying to think things through for ourselves.
You're reminding me of the second show that I ever did, which, remember, this is now almost 9.5 years ago, with Marty Ruiz. And Marty Ruiz would talk about how he gets divine drop-ins, divine downloads, right? And so I think that's what you're talking about here is, and it's to be present to that, to be available for that. It's just so, and I love how you distinguish that, Ellen. That was yummy.
Thank you.
Shall we go on to the next one, or did you want to add something, Shakti?
No, I'll actually tie it into the next one.
Okay, so the next one that I just couldn't resist hitting as well, distinguishing between the higher self and the human self.
Yes, so we're very intentional about using this language because no one's ever taught us that, right? We think we're just human beings. But the truth of the matter is we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
I love how you quote Chardin on your site. It's fantastic.
Yes. And if we're spiritual beings having a human experience, then I have to look at, what does that mean that I'm a spiritual being? So we have this higher self. We have this higher knowing that's connected to the spirit of all that is. And when he talks about divine downloads, those divine downloads come to his higher self. Then it's up to his higher self to apply them into his human life. So our human self is our everyday human activities, our mind, our body, our feelings and emotions and our thoughts. But that's not our higher self. Our higher self operates at a much higher level of frequency and vibration to love, to pure love, and to the light of all that is. And we radiate that love through our human self to ourself and to the world. But as human beings, we have so much we have to heal in our own human self, and we can't do that without our higher self. We need our higher self to guide us, and that's our intuition. Our intuition comes from our higher self. So it's a higher aspect of looking and listening and integrating our insights into our human choices that we need to make to experience growth.
That was beautifully rendered, Shakti, and I completely align with you. I've really come to understand that every single human being walking the planet is a walking wounded human.
Yes.
And the opportunity is to get present to the extent to which we are wounded, and then what are we doing to try to heal ourselves. I think the most dangerous people that I've ever seen, including leaders, are those who are completely unaware of their wounds.
Yeah.
They are throwing so much shrapnel into the world as they thrust themselves about, not realizing that they're really just wrestling with a lot of pain.
Absolutely. And I think through that pain that people are in and not being responsible for it, they think that their human thoughts and their human feelings is their higher self.
Right.
And it's just not. And most people are so surprised when Alan and I help them wake up to who they truly are. Then we have a higher perspective to deal with the human feelings and thoughts, because we can't ignore them. Like you said, we have to heal those wounds, but from a place of love, not from a place of separation.
And not from the language of humanity per se either, or ego and all the things that live in that space.
100% correct, Elise. Not from there.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to add to that, Ellen, before we go on to the next one?
No, let's go. Let's keep going. Great.
All right. Well, this one's really intriguing to me. This idea, attribute number 3, the wisdom of the seasons. I have a favorite season, and we're in it right now. But let's hear about the wisdom of the seasons.
So why is the fall your favorite season, Elise?
And I read a little bit about how you describe it. Maybe a bit different for me is I find myself coming alive in fall. So we have this long, hot summer, and then the cooler temperature comes, and I feel this sense of like I can get down to business kind of thing. And if I look at so many of like my job changes over the years, or when things happen, things get released, it's in the fall. And there's something invigorating for me about that before we go into the winter when things get really cold and I feel like I need to hibernate. That's what fall is for me.
Well, kudos to you for actually being able to recognize that connection that you have to the seasons. Now, we all have connection to the seasons. When we think of spring as an example, everybody would say, oh, well, the spring's about rebirth. The plants are coming up out of the ground, the trees are blossoming, and that's all true. And what we would say is, okay, well, if that's true, how does that apply to business, right? Well, I don't know. So maybe it's a great time to launch new projects or new products or new services, give birth to things, just like nature is giving birth to the plants and the trees in our world. So as a leader, we would say that's a good time to mirror what spring represents in our businesses.
Where most companies, at least, do it, the businesses are set up by quarters.
Right.
Right? And so that we follow this Gregorian calendar, which has nothing to do with the wisdom of the seasons. Nothing. So if we understand that there are universal laws and principles in each season that give us higher knowing, higher wisdom to then apply into our businesses and our lives, we would rethink how we have things on our calendars and how our businesses are structured.
I completely agree that our 12-month calendar is quite artificial, and it doesn't pay attention to rhythms and such. And so very, very interesting. And of course, as I go on my own journey, Shakti and Alan, I'm much more present to my need, my visceral need to be in nature, to be enveloped by nature, to be overwhelmed by its beauty, to be just moved by its beauty. This morning, I ran my 6 miles with my friend at White Rock Lake and just got moved to tears. It was so beautiful. The sun just coming up, just this beautiful orange orb coming up over the water. And I was like, just for me. It's got to be just for me.
And like right now we're in the late autumn season, and the divine teaching in the late autumn is different than in the beginning of the autumn season, which is about taking stock and inventory and being in harvest and gratitude. But we're now in this tricky part of the autumn season. We're betwixt and between seasons. It's no longer really the beginning of autumn. It's for sure not summer. And it's not winter yet, but we're kind of in between the two. Yeah. And the divine principle, what this season teaches us in the late autumn, is the principle of death, regeneration, and rebirth. So we have to shed our skin. We have to let go of the leaves. The tree isn't trying to hold on to the leaves that are naturally falling, right? Nor does anybody cry because the leaves are falling off the tree. Because we know come spring, it's going to get reborn again. But we don't look at our own lives or our own leadership or our own organizations. What is it we need to shed? What is it we need to let go of that no longer serves us, and allow that to regenerate our spirit, regenerate our purpose, regenerate our power, and relook and listen for what's in the highest and best good to be reborn again. So that's just an example.
So you could say, Elise, that when you found that it's the great time, that the fall for you personally has been a good time for you to, now these are our words, not yours, shed work situations that no longer work for you. You had your spirit had an intuitive knowingness that this was the right time for you to be doing this. And it was serving you, and you were not necessarily conscious of it. And all we're saying is, well, now you get to be conscious about it.
Right. And now I am conscious about it.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It would be so wonderful if leaders really could be taught about the sacred teachings in each season and come to each season with curiosity and wonder, what does this season have to contribute to my life as a human being, as a leader? And how could I bring the teachings of this season into my company and empower my company with these teachings? Wow.
Beautiful. Really, wow is right. Let's let our listeners and viewers just think about that as we take our last break. You think about the power of the seasons, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're on air with Shakti Dudley and Alan Prushan of Enlightening Leadership. We've been talking about a few of their attributes. After the break, we're going to talk about the next one, which is embodying completeness. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. I mentioned in my last break that my latest book came out in 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization. What I did for you is I created a simple 3-page assessment that you can take off my Gusto-Now site to determine the extent to which your organization is meeting the needs of today's discerning workforce. You can find it again at Gusto-Now.com. If you are just now joining us, my guests are Prushan and Shakti Dudley of Enlightening Leaders, where they offer something for business leaders to enhance and integrate their spirituality into their lives, their leadership, and their businesses, which is probably what we've been talking about today, especially with and through their attributes. So the next one I wanted to cover is the idea of embodying completeness. Now, that's a concept that, of course, all three of us are familiar with, but I would venture to say most people who are listening to the show are not familiar with it. So talk to us about embodying completeness.
Well,
I think a good place to start is, a comment I think, Elise, that you made earlier, that we're all, wounded in some way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah.
And as you said that, I was thinking to myself, could you imagine like closing your eyes and seeing the world and everyone interacting with each other just based upon their wounds? Okay. That's in reality, that's what's actually happening.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's, it's not a pretty picture that one would see if we, now we all try not to do that. Okay. Or I should say, most of us try not to do that. But what embodying completeness could look like, I already started to speak to when I shared my example of my story about the conversation in the car on Sunday night, and then me being responsible by sending an email to my children and to copying my wife, because I was clearly, my own old wounds were at play with why I responded the way I did. That was my human self, not my higher self, responding to what was happening in the conversation with my wife. And I behaved in such a way that's inconsistent with who I hold myself to be, or I should say who my higher self holds itself to be, right? And so I did it as for me to be complete with what I did that didn't work, also to be responsible for it, and that I could move on unburdened by what happened, in this case, in the recent past. So the truth of the matter is, enlightening leaders are always seeking to get complete, because we're all human. We all make mistakes, like the one my example. And if we don't get complete with the way things were and the way things weren't, we carry that burden forward. Now, imagine if I didn't get complete with my children, and then I went out to dinner with them again. Now they're waiting for the next blow up by dad, right? Now, maybe my son's more used to it, but his partner isn't. Do I want her to be seeing me as this, person that at any point in time is going to explode and make the environment uncomfortable for everyone? Of course not. But when I take responsibility, then she knows that I'm actually paying attention. I recognize the impact I had on others. I'm responsible for it. And because I communicated it, I'm not committed to it. So yes, it was for them, and it was every bit as much for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
To unburden myself from my poor behavior.
Yeah.
And Elise, this one is really near and dear to my heart, because we create a very safe space for the leaders that we work with to really hold their pain, for them to unburden themselves and tell the truth, maybe even for the first time. Things that they just never dared to say out loud, or things that happened in the past that they've worked on, but just can't seem to get complete. And we have some magic around us through the powers that be and the light that Alan and I listen to and give to others that really give people a safe haven to embrace their own pain and learn, how do you forgive and let go of the past in a way that's enlightening and in a way that lifts you up and lifts others up, where you can truly, truly be complete. And then once you have done that work, how do you then continue a practice of living your life being complete every day? Because as leaders, we have that responsibility.
Yeah, and if
Go ahead,
I could,
Alan.
I would just add, there's something truly magical. We see it, we've lived it when we're working with a leadership team, and they get complete with personal situations that have nothing to do with anyone else on the leadership team, and or getting complete with interactions with other members on that team. It brings seasoned professionals to tears. And I say that not like as a badge of honor, but when you create a safe space, people get to be their authentic selves in a way that simply does not happen in the professional workspace. And when they do, what gets created is a level of compassion and collegiality that you cannot create any other way, because it can't be manufactured. It has to be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And it can only be authentic when we're willing to truly be vulnerable with each other.
Mm-hmm. I totally understand that and really, really appreciate that. And like we've been sort of saying this, but I think it really bears saying out forthright here, that I think all three of us are present to just how difficult it is to be a leader today. The spotlight has probably never been stronger on leaders today. And as you said at the beginning of the show, I think it was you, Alan, maybe it was you, Shakti, I can't remember which one said that this being the force from everyone in the organization is pushing up on the leader to be more, to do more, to be more emotionally intelligent, to be more giving, to be more understanding, to be more communicative, to more. And I just really want to share and express how difficult it is to be a leader, and therefore what it is such an honor for the work that we get to do, to be in the space that we've been talking about, to work with leaders on this really precious journey. It's really hard work. A lot of people are saying, I'm not going to do this. I'm out of the leadership game. This is a lot to expect of me, and I appreciate that and support that. And those that stay in the game, they need help.
And Elise, this is what you just said is exactly why Alan and I are creating the Enlightening Leaders community. So leaders from wherever can join the community. That's private, right? I mean,
Right.
It's not public. It's a private community to hold their heart and be with like-minded, like-spirited leaders that are on this path to learn about becoming an enlightening leader.
That's wonderful. I think that's terrific that you got the community, because one thing that I have certainly heard from people that I work with is, gosh, it can be lonely in that smaller circle, or not to have really someone they could really confide in beyond maybe, who they're working with. So we've only got like about 5 minutes left here of the show. So I want to jump to one other attribute in particular here next, if we can. And this is something that I've gotten really present to just in my own journey the last probably 3 or 4 years. And that's the idea of everything is interconnected. If one of you could speak to that.
I'll let Shakti take the lead on this one.
Okay.
Well, it really points to the universal law of divine oneness. And one of the things that the Enlightening Leaders Journey makes available to people is teaching the universal laws. And these universal laws, Elise, are the most precious wisdom I have ever gained in my life. And nobody's teaching them in school. You know, I wish they taught these to elementary school and junior high school and high schoolers. But they are ancient principles that have been around since the time began, and the underpinnings of everything in life. And the main one is the universal law of divine oneness, which says that everything is connected to everything else. Everything. What we think, what we say, what we do, all has a corresponding effect on others, ourselves, and the world around us. And leaders really need to rise up to that and really get that. You know, it's not us versus them anymore. That paradigm is bankrupt, right? And we must transform the mindset and transform the culture in our organizations, that everyone and everything is connected. And our youth is going to be those pushing us up in the organization, because that's really what they demand. Yeah. They demand connection. They demand interconnectedness. They demand that everything matters. All living things matter. I will even go as far as to say objects matter. Nature matters. Every single thing is connected. And if we don't realize that, then the universal law of cause and effect will be our demise. You know what I mean by that?
That was powerful. I do, yes. Did you want to add anything to that, Alan?
No. I think Shakti said it very well, but I think what she just pointed to is, I'll say, people from our generation, okay, don't necessarily have much connection to the universal laws, and they don't necessarily see that there is a cause and effect to the decisions and choices they make as leaders. They just say, well, this is my decision, and then they don't realize that there's a ripple effect, that they may not be able to point from A to B to see that this decision impacted X, Y, and Z. And that's what Shakti's pointing to.
And so if someone in my organization or family or friend circle is suffering, am I separate from that? Well, it's their suffering. No, I am not separate from that. Not according to the universal law of oneness. So I'm going to extend my love. I'm going to extend my insight and be of help in any way that I can to aid them in releasing their suffering and coming more into a place of peace and harmony.
Except in the old paradigm of leadership, if Shakti's personally suffering in the work in her life, we're not allowed to talk about that in the workplace.
Right.
We're not allowed to bring, I'm not saying we're not truly allowed, but in the old paradigm, it's not my job as her leader to actually deal with that. But that's just false. And then when she leaves, people wonder, well, why did she leave? Well, it's simple, because nobody cared about her. They didn't care about the human being. They were so focused on the task at hand, the results that we're pursuing, the impact that we're having on the business, that they didn't tender the challenge that she was dealing with in her life. You know, I have a very dear friend that used to work for me.
Ella, we've got like 30 seconds for you to tell that story.
And she would say, the best thing that ever I had with you as a leader is that I was able to cry in your office, and you always had a teacher for me, right? And that it was okay for her to have her experiences in life in my office.
That's beautiful. That's the world I want to live in, Ellen, for sure.
And it's available to everyone.
It is, as long as we let our guard down and we do this work. This goes by so fast, you guys. Thank you so much for coming on Working on Purpose. It's so good to see you again and celebrate the work that you're doing. It's so, so important. Shakti, Alan, thank you for coming on. Don't go away. Let me just close the show. Listeners and viewers, you're going to want to learn more about Shakti Dudley and Alan Prushan and the work that they're doing together at Enlightening Leaders. So visit their website. It's enlighteningsleaders.com. Once again, enlighteningleaders.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on with Doctors Christopher Wong Michelson and Jennifer Tosti Karas talking about their new book, Is Your Work Worth It? How to Think About Meaningful Work. It was a meaty conversation among us three meaning and work researchers, and I dare say it will make you meaningfully question how you spend your own working hours and are stewarding the experience for those you lead. Next week, we'll be on the air with Jennifer Pastikas talking about the brand new conference we both are part of, which is Thrive in 25. I mentioned that at the beginning of the show. It's specifically curated to develop the whole woman. Jennifer is one of the organizers, and I am proud to serve as the MC. You can learn more about this conference at www.thrive-in25.com, and 25 is the number. See you then for another inspiring and educational conversation on working on purpose. And remember, work is one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.